What happens when the world's deadliest female sniper walks into a room full of elite soldiers who think she's just another pretty face with fake ink? What happens when years of undercover work, life-threatening missions, and carefully guarded secrets collide with one moment of truth that could destroy everything she's built? This is the story of Sarah Chen, a woman whose delicate butterfly tattoo held secrets that would make grown men tremble. A story where appearances deceive, where the quiet girl in the corner could put a bullet through a target from over a mile away, and where one pulled-back hood would change the entire dynamic of America's most elite military unit forever. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones you never see coming. Sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who's been protecting your life from the shadows. And sometimes, just sometimes, the fake tattoo everyone laughs about is the only real thing in a room full of lies. Get ready for a story that will make you question everything you think you know about strength, courage, and what it really means to serve your country in silence. Sarah Chen had always been good at being invisible. At 5'4", with a slight build and soft features, she could blend into any crowd without a second glance. But what most people didn't know was that this unremarkable appearance was her greatest weapon. For the past 8 years, she had been one of the military's most classified assets, a ghost sniper whose very existence was known only to a handful of people with the highest security clearances. The butterfly tattoo on her left shoulder blade had been part of her cover for so long that sometimes she forgot it wasn't real. The intricate design, rendered in delicate pastels with tiny sparkles that caught the light, looked exactly like something a college girl might get on a whim. It was feminine, pretty, and completely at odds with the deadly precision that lived in her hands. The tattoo artist who had created it was actually a CIA contractor, and every detail had been carefully planned to support her cover identity as a graduate student in international relations. But today, everything was about to change. After years of operating in the shadows, Sarah was being pulled into the light for the first time. The briefing room at the Naval Special Warfare Command was filled with the kind of men she had only worked alongside in the field under cover of darkness. SEAL Team 6 commanders, Delta Force operators, Marine Force recon leaders, and other special operations personnel who represented the absolute elite of American military power. Sarah sat quietly in the back corner of the room, wearing civilian clothes that made her look like someone's assistant who had wandered into the wrong meeting. Her long black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore minimal makeup that emphasized her youthful appearance. To everyone else in the room, she appeared to be exactly what her file claimed, an intelligence analyst who specialized in foreign language interpretation and cultural assessment. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the front of the room, his presence commanding immediate attention from every person present. At 6'3", with 23 years of service, he had led more classified missions than most people could imagine. His weathered face bore the kind of scars that came from real combat, not training exercises, and his reputation for turning impossible missions into successful operations was legendary throughout the special operations community. The mission briefing began with satellite imagery of a compound in Eastern Europe where a high-value target had been identified. The target was Viktor Petrov, a former Spetsnaz operative who had gone rogue and was now selling military secrets to the highest bidder. Intelligence indicated that Petrov was planning to auction off the identities of American deep-cover operatives to hostile foreign governments, a sale that would result in the torture and execution of dozens of American agents. The compound where Petrov was hiding was a fortress built into a mountainside, surrounded by heavily armed guards and sophisticated security systems. Getting close enough for a traditional assault would be nearly impossible without massive casualties. The mission required surgical precision, the kind that only came from a single, perfectly placed shot from an extreme distance. Commander Morrison explained that the mission would require a sniper capable of making a shot from over 1,500 meters in challenging mountain conditions, with potentially high winds and limited visibility. The margin for error would be essentially zero, as a missed shot would alert the entire compound and likely result in Petrov's escape or the execution of American hostages known to be held on the premises. As the briefing continued, several of the operators in the room began discussing the technical challenges of the shot. The distance was at the very edge of what most military snipers could achieve, even under ideal conditions. The mountain terrain would create unpredictable wind patterns, and the target would likely only be visible for seconds at a time through a narrow window of opportunity. Captain Rodriguez from Delta Force suggested that they would need to bring in one of their top snipers from Fort Bragg, someone with extensive mountain warfare experience and a proven track record at extreme distances. Major Thompson from the Marines recommended a sniper from his unit, who held the record for the longest confirmed kill shot in recent combat operations. Sarah listened to the discussion with growing amusement. These men were debating which of their shooters might be capable of a shot she had made successfully dozens of times in similar conditions. But she remained silent, knowing that her moment would come when the mission commander revealed why she was really in the room. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Petty Officer First Class Danny Williams, a young SEAL who clearly felt the need to prove himself among such senior personnel, noticed Sarah sitting quietly in the back. With a smirk that suggested he thought he was being clever, he turned to address her directly. "Hey, sweetheart, I think you might be in the wrong room," Williams said, his voice carrying just enough condescension to make several other operators chuckle. "This is a briefing for actual operators, not support staff. The administrative officers are down the hall." Sarah met his gaze steadily but didn't respond. She had encountered this kind of attitude countless times over the years, and she had learned that the best response was often no response at all. Let them reveal their assumptions and prejudices while she gathered information about their character and capabilities. Williams, emboldened by what he interpreted as timidity, pressed further. "Though I have to say, that's a cute little butterfly tattoo peeking out from your shirt. Did you get that at one of those mall places? It looks pretty fake to me." Several other operators laughed at the comment, and Sarah noticed Commander Morrison's jaw tighten slightly. He clearly wasn't pleased with the unprofessional behavior, but he also seemed curious to see how she would handle the situation. "Actually," Williams continued, apparently unable to resist escalating the situation, "I bet that whole thing is just a temporary tattoo. Probably washes off in the shower, right? I mean, you don't look like the type who could handle the pain of real ink." The room fell silent as Williams' comments crossed the line from casual teasing into outright disrespect. Sarah could feel the tension building as the senior operators began to recognize that the young SEAL was making a serious mistake, though none of them yet understood exactly what that mistake was. Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and measured. "You're right that appearances can be deceiving," she said quietly. "Sometimes the things that look fake are more real than you could possibly imagine." Before Williams could respond with what was clearly going to be another dismissive comment, Commander Morrison stepped forward and called for attention. The time had come to reveal why Sarah was really in the room, and the revelation was going to change everything these men thought they knew about their mission and about the quiet young woman sitting in the corner.
"Gentlemen," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority that came from decades of command, "I'd like you to meet your sniper for this operation."
"Meet Ghost 7, the operator who will be taking the shot that eliminates Viktor Petrov."
The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear the hum of the air conditioning system.
Every eye in the room was now focused on her, and she could see the confusion and disbelief written across their faces. This couldn't be right. The small woman in civilian clothes couldn't possibly be the sniper they needed for such a critical mission. Williams was the first to find his voice, though what came out was more of a strangled protest than actual words. "Sir, with all due respect, this has to be some kind of mistake. She's not even in uniform. She looks like she belongs in a college library, not on a battlefield." Commander Morrison's expression hardened as he stared down the young SEAL. "Petty Officer Williams, I suggest you reconsider your next words very carefully. You are currently addressing one of the most lethal operatives in the United States military. Someone whose kill record exceeds that of every person in this room combined." Sarah watched as the reality of the situation slowly dawned on the faces around her. These men, who had spent their careers being the best at what they did, were suddenly confronted with the possibility that their assumptions about strength and capability were fundamentally flawed. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible as they struggled to reconcile her appearance with Morrison's words. Major Thompson leaned forward in his chair, his expression shifting from skepticism to professional interest. "Sir, what are we talking about in terms of confirmed kills and operational history?" Morrison turned to a classified file on his desk, though Sarah suspected he already knew the numbers by heart. Ghost 7 has 137 confirmed kills across 43 separate operations spanning 8 years of active duty. Her longest confirmed kill was made at a distance of 2,112 meters in Afghanistan, under combat conditions with crosswinds exceeding 20 miles per hour. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Several of the operators exchanged glances, clearly trying to process information that challenged everything they thought they knew about military sniping. A kill at over 2,000 meters was the kind of shot that belonged in military legend, not in the service record of someone who looked like she should be studying for finals. Captain Rodriguez spoke up, his voice carefully controlled. "Sir, Those numbers would make Ghost 7 one of the most effective snipers in military history. The longest confirmed kill on record is just over 3,000 meters, and that was made under ideal conditions, with extensive preparation time. Correct, Morrison replied. And what makes Ghost 7's record even more impressive is that every one of those kills was made while operating under deep cover, often with minimal support and improvised equipment. She has consistently achieved results that our best snipers accomplish only under controlled conditions. Sarah could see William struggling with the information, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and what might have been the beginning of respect. The young SEAL was learning a hard lesson about the danger of making assumptions based on appearance, and Sarah suspected it was a lesson he would remember for the rest of his career. The briefing continued with Morrison providing additional details about Sarah's operational history, though he was careful to keep the most classified information protected. What he could share painted a picture of an operator who had spent years living false identities in hostile countries, gathering intelligence and eliminating high-value targets without ever being detected or suspected. Her ability to blend into civilian populations while maintaining the skills and equipment necessary for precision shooting had made her invaluable for missions where traditional military snipers would be immediately identified and compromised. She had posed as everything from a foreign exchange student to a humanitarian aid worker, always maintaining her cover while carrying out missions that help protect American interests around the world. As the details of her service record emerged, Sarah watched the dynamic in the room shift dramatically. The casual dismissal and barely concealed amusement were replaced by professional respect and, in some cases, something approaching awe. These men understood better than most how difficult it was to achieve even a fraction of what she had accomplished. But Sarah also knew that respect based on numbers and statistics was different from the trust that came from working together in the field. The upcoming mission would be her first time operating openly alongside other American Special Forces, and she understood that proving herself on paper was very different from proving herself under fire. The mission timeline called for insertion into the target area within 72 hours. The team would consist of Sarah as the primary sniper, 2 SEAL operators for close protection and target spotting, and a Delta Force communications specialist for coordination with command. It would be Sarah's responsibility to make the critical shot, while the rest of the team ensured her safety and provided real-time intelligence updates. Commander Morrison assigned the team members and began discussing insertion methods and extraction plans. Sarah listened carefully, noting how the other operators deferred to her expertise when it came to questions about shooting angles and timing. The shift in their behavior was subtle but unmistakable. They were beginning to treat her as a peer rather than an outsider. When the briefing concluded, most of the operators filed out of the room to begin their mission preparations. Williams lingered for a moment, clearly wanting to say something but unsure how to approach the situation. Finally, he stepped forward and extended his hand. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology," he said, his voice lacking the bravado that had characterized his earlier comments. "I was way out of line, and I let my assumptions get the better of my professionalism. I hope you can forgive the disrespect." Sarah shook his hand, appreciating the genuine remorse in his voice. "We all make assumptions, Petty Officer Williams. The key is being willing to learn from them when we're proven wrong." As Williams left the room, Commander Morrison approached Sarah with a slight smile. "That was well handled. You could have humiliated him, but you chose to educate him instead. That kind of judgment is exactly why you're perfect for this mission." Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave for her pre-mission preparations. In 72 hours, she would be in position on a mountainside in Eastern Europe, preparing to take a shot that would either validate everything she had worked for over the past 8 years, or expose her to a level of scrutiny that could end her career in special operations. But as she walked out of the briefing room, Sarah felt a sense of anticipation rather than anxiety. For the first time in years, she would be operating as herself, rather than behind a carefully constructed cover identity. She would be working alongside other American operators who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of achieving. The butterfly tattoo on her shoulder blade seemed to shift slightly as she moved, the carefully applied prosthetic responding to her body heat and movement in a way that made it appear completely natural. Tomorrow she would begin the process of transforming from intelligence analyst Sarah Chen into Ghost 7, the sniper who had become a legend among the small circle of people who knew she existed. The mission ahead would test every skill she had developed over 8 years of covert operations. But more than that, it would mark her transition from the shadows into a world where her true capabilities would finally be recognized and acknowledged by the special operations community she had served in secret for so long. The helicopter's rotors cut through the thin mountain air as Sarah adjusted her equipment one final time. 48 hours had passed since the briefing. And now she found herself approaching the insertion point in the mountains of Eastern Europe. The landscape below was a maze of rocky peaks and deep valleys that would provide perfect cover for their approach, but would also make extraction extremely challenging if things went wrong. Sarah wore full tactical gear for the first time in years, her usual civilian clothes replaced by advanced camouflage designed specifically for the rocky terrain they would be operating in. Her primary weapon was a custom-built rifle that had been specifically selected for this mission, capable of accuracy at extreme ranges while remaining light enough for the mountain climbing that would be required to reach their shooting position. Sitting across from her in the helicopter were the 3 operators who would comprise the rest of her team. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hayes was a 15-year SEAL veteran who would serve as her spotter and provide close protection during the mission. His weathered face and calm demeanor suggested someone who had seen every possible combat situation and had learned to approach each new challenge with professional detachment. Next to Hayes sat Sergeant First Class Alex Rivera, a Delta Force communications specialist whose job would be to maintain contact with command and coordinate the timing of their operation with other elements of the larger mission. Rivera was younger than Hayes but carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from years of high-stakes operations where communication failures could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The third member of their team was Staff Sergeant Mike Foster, another SEAL who would be responsible for securing their insertion and extraction routes while providing additional firepower if they encountered enemy forces during their approach or withdrawal. Foster had volunteered for the mission specifically because he wanted to work with the legendary Ghost 7, though he had been careful to keep his enthusiasm professional during their mission planning sessions. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through their headsets, informing them that they were approaching the insertion point. Sarah checked her equipment one more time, running through the mental checklist that had become second nature over years of covert operations. Everything was in place, from her primary weapon and ammunition to the backup systems and emergency extraction protocols that might save their lives if the mission went sideways. As they prepared for insertion, Chief Hayes leaned closer to speak directly to Sarah. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've worked with some of the best shooters in the business. But I have to admit, I'm curious about how someone with your background developed the kind of skills we heard about in that briefing room." Sarah appreciated the respectful way Hayes had phrased his question. Unlike Williams's earlier assumptions, this was a professional inquiry from one operator to another. "Most of my training happened in the field," she replied. "When you're operating alone in hostile territory, you learn to make every shot count because you might not get a second chance." Rivera nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. Range training is one thing, but combat shooting under pressure is completely different. The psychological factors alone can destroy even the most technically proficient shooter." "Exactly," Sarah said. "The technical aspects of marksmanship can be taught to almost anyone with enough time and practice. But the mental discipline required to remain calm and focused when lives are on the line, that's something you can only develop through experience." Foster looked up from his final equipment check. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what was the most challenging shot you've ever had to make? Not asking for classified details, just curious about the conditions that pushed your skills to the limit." Sarah considered the question for a moment, thinking back through 8 years of operations that had tested her abilities in every conceivable way. There was a mission in Afghanistan where I had to eliminate a target who was holding American hostages in a building that was going to be bombed by coalition forces in 6 minutes. The shot was through a window at 1,100 meters with a crosswind that was shifting direction every few seconds. Hayes whistled softly. 1,100 meters through a window with shifting winds and a 6-minute deadline. That's the kind of shot that would give most snipers nightmares. "The worst part was that I could see the hostages through my scope," Sarah continued. "If I missed or if my timing was off by even a few seconds, they would die in the bombing. There was no backup plan and no second chances." "Did you make the shot?" Rivera asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The target went down with 5 minutes and 43 seconds to spare," Sarah replied. "The hostages were extracted safely, and the building was destroyed on schedule." The helicopter pilot's voice interrupted their conversation, announcing that they had reached the insertion point. Sarah looked out the window at the rugged terrain below, noting the rock formations and vegetation patterns that would either provide concealment or expose them to enemy observation, depending on how carefully they planned their approach. The insertion was conducted using fast rope techniques that allowed the team to reach the ground quickly, while minimizing the helicopter's exposure to potential ground fire. Sarah slid down the rope with the fluid motion of someone who had performed similar insertions dozens of times, landing silently on the rocky ground and immediately moving to cover, while the other team members completed their descent. Within minutes, the helicopter had departed, leaving the four-person team alone in enemy territory with a mission that would require them to travel several kilometers through challenging terrain to reach their shooting position. The journey would take them through areas that might be patrolled by enemy forces, requiring them to move with extreme caution while carrying the heavy equipment necessary for a precision shooting operation. Chief Hayes took point for the movement, using his extensive experience with mountain warfare to select routes that would minimize their exposure while allowing them to maintain the pace necessary to reach their target area before dawn. Sarah followed directly behind him, her movements silent and sure despite the challenging terrain and heavy equipment load. As they moved through the mountains, Sarah found herself reflecting on how different this mission felt from her usual covert operations. For years, she had worked alone, relying entirely on her own skills and judgment to complete missions and survive in hostile environments. Having a team of professional operators providing support and security was both reassuring and slightly unsettling. The terrain they were crossing was exactly the kind of environment where Sarah's unconventional background became an advantage. While the other team members were expert military operators, Sarah had spent years learning to move through civilian environments without drawing attention. That same skill set translated surprisingly well to covert movement through natural terrain, where the ability to appear harmless and unthreatening could be just as valuable as traditional military stealth techniques. After 2 hours of movement, they reached a position approximately 500 meters from their planned shooting site. Hayes called for a halt while he and Foster conducted a reconnaissance of the area ahead, checking for enemy patrols or security measures that might compromise their approach to the final position. During the halt, Rivera established communications with command and received an update on the target's location and activities. Intelligence indicated that Viktor Petrov was maintaining his normal routine, which included a brief appearance on a specific balcony each morning at approximately dawn. That appearance would provide the window of opportunity for Sarah's shot, but it would also be the only chance they would get before Petrov's security detail would likely move him to a more secure location. As they waited for Hayes and Foster to complete their reconnaissance, Rivera shared additional intelligence about the target compound. The building was a converted monastery built into the side of a mountain, with thick stone walls and limited access points that made a traditional assault nearly impossible. The balcony where Petrov would appear was on the 3rd floor, and was partially protected by an overhang that would limit the angles from which a shot could be taken. Sarah studied the intelligence reports and satellite imagery, calculating distances and angles while considering the various environmental factors that would affect her shot. The shooting position they had selected would put her at approximately 1,520 meters from the target, well within her capabilities but still requiring precise calculations and perfect execution. Hayes and Foster returned from their reconnaissance with good news. The route to their shooting position appeared to be clear of enemy patrols, and the site itself offered excellent concealment while providing the clear line of sight to the target that Sarah would need. However, they had also observed increased activity around the compound, suggesting that Petrov's security team might be preparing to move him to a new location. The team moved quickly to their final position, a rocky outcropping that provided natural camouflage while offering an unobstructed view of the target building. Sarah began setting up her shooting position while Hayes established a spotting position that would allow him to provide real-time information about wind conditions and target movement. As Sarah prepared her rifle and calculated the various factors that would affect her shot, she could feel the familiar calm that always descended over her before critical missions. This was the moment when years of training and experience came together, when all the theoretical knowledge and practice scenarios became focused on a single objective that could mean the difference between success and failure for the entire operation. Rivera maintained communications with command, while Foster established security perimeters that would provide early warning if enemy forces discovered their position. The coordination between the 4 team members was smooth and professional. Each operator focused on their specific responsibilities, while remaining aware of how their actions supported the overall mission. As dawn approached, Sarah made her final preparations for the shot. She adjusted her scope settings based on the current weather conditions and double-checked her calculations for bullet drop and wind compensation. The butterfly tattoo on her shoulder seemed to flutter slightly as she moved, the sophisticated prosthetic responding to her movements in a way that maintained the illusion of reality even in her current tactical gear. Hayes provided a steady stream of information about conditions at the target location, noting changes in wind direction and any movement around the building that might affect the timing of Petrov's appearance. His experience as a spotter was evident in the quality and relevance of the information he provided, allowing Sarah to make final adjustments to her shooting position. At precisely 6:47 in the morning, movement was detected on the target balcony. Sarah adjusted her position slightly, and began controlling her breathing as she prepared to engage. Through her scope, she could see a figure moving toward the balcony rail, though she needed positive identification before taking the shot. Hayes confirmed target identification based on photographs and intelligence briefings. Viktor Petrov had appeared on the balcony as predicted, presenting Sarah with the opportunity she had been waiting for. The former Spetsnaz operative stood casually at the balcony rail, apparently unaware that he was being observed from over a mile away. Sarah made her final calculations and began the process of taking the shot. Her breathing slowed to a controlled rhythm as she found her natural point of aim and began applying pressure to the trigger. This was the moment when everything she had learned over 8 years of covert operations would be tested under the most challenging possible conditions. The shot would need to be perfect. There would be no second chance, no opportunity for adjustment or correction. If she missed, Petrov would disappear into the compound security protocols and the mission would fail. The lives of American operatives whose identities Petrov planned to sell would remain in jeopardy, and the intelligence network that had taken years to establish would be compromised. But as Sarah settled into her shooting position and prepared to squeeze the trigger, she felt the same confidence that had carried her through 43 successful operations over 8 years. This was what she had trained for, what she had lived for during all those years of maintaining false identities and operating in the shadows. The moment of truth was at hand, and Ghost 7 was ready to prove once again that appearances could indeed be deceiving. The butterfly tattoo that had been mocked as fake would soon be revealed as the mark of one of the most lethal operatives in American military history, and the shot she was about to take would demonstrate why legends were sometimes based on truth rather than imagination. Through her scope, Petrov remained motionless at the balcony rail, unaware that his time was measured in heartbeats rather than hours. Sarah's finger began the final pressure that would send a bullet across more than 1,500 meters of mountain air, guided by skills that had been forged in the crucible of actual combat rather than training ranges. The mission that had begun with laughter and mockery about a fake tattoo was about to conclude with a demonstration of real power and genuine capability that would be remembered by every operator who had witnessed Sarah's journey, from underestimated analyst to acknowledged expert. But the most important memory would belong to the enemy operative who would never live to realize that he had been eliminated by someone he never saw coming. The bullet left Sarah's rifle at precisely 6:48 and 12 seconds, traveling across 1,520 meters of mountain air at over 2,700 feet per second. Sarah maintained her shooting position for the full flight time, watching through her scope as the projectile covered the distance to its target with the precision that came from perfect calculations and flawless execution. Viktor Petrov never knew what hit him. One moment he was standing casually at the balcony rail, enjoying what he believed would be another profitable day of selling American secrets to hostile governments. The next moment he was dead, eliminated by a shot that would be analyzed and discussed in military circles for years to come as an example of precision marksmanship under the most challenging possible conditions. Chief Hayes confirmed the hit through his spotting scope, his voice calm and professional as he reported target elimination to Rivera for relay to command. The mission had been accomplished with surgical precision, exactly as planned. But Sarah knew that the real test would come during their extraction from enemy territory. Within minutes of the shot, the compound below erupted into activity, as Petrov's security team realized their primary asset had been eliminated by an unknown sniper operating from an extreme distance. Radio communications between various security elements began immediately as they attempted to coordinate a response and locate the shooting position. Foster reported movement from multiple patrol elements that were beginning to spread out from the compound in a systematic search pattern designed to locate and eliminate whoever had been responsible for Petrov's death. The enemy forces were professional and experienced, exactly the kind of opposition that could turn a successful mission into a catastrophic failure if the extraction wasn't handled perfectly. Sarah began breaking down her shooting position while Hayes gathered his spotting equipment, and Rivera maintained communication with command regarding extraction procedures. The helicopter that would carry them to safety was already en route, but it would be several hours before it could reach their current position without being detected by the enemy forces that were now actively searching for them. The team began moving immediately, following an extraction route that had been carefully planned to avoid areas where enemy patrols would be most likely to search. Foster took point for the movement while Hayes covered their rear, leaving Rivera and Sarah to maintain the pace necessary to reach their extraction point before enemy forces could close the noose that was beginning to tighten around their position. As they moved through the rocky terrain, Sarah found herself thinking about the shot she had just made and what it meant for her future in special operations. For 8 years, she had operated in complete secrecy, her achievements known only to a handful of intelligence officials and mission commanders. But this mission had been different. She had operated openly alongside other elite operators who would return to their units with stories about the legendary Ghost 7. The movement through enemy territory was exactly the kind of situation where Sarah's unconventional background became a crucial advantage. While her teammates were expert military operators, Sarah had spent years learning to evade detection in hostile environments where being discovered meant certain death. Her ability to move quietly and appear harmless had kept her alive through dozens of operations, and those same skills were now helping keep the entire team safe. After an hour of movement, they reached a position where Rivera could establish better communications with Command and receive updated intelligence about enemy search patterns. The information was both encouraging and concerning. The shot had been so precise and the shooting position so well concealed that enemy forces were having difficulty determining where the attack had originated. However, their search was becoming more systematic and thorough as time passed. Foster reported seeing patrol elements moving through valleys below their position, and Hayes identified helicopter activity that suggested the enemy was bringing in additional resources to support their search efforts. The window for successful extraction was beginning to narrow, and they needed to reach their pickup point before enemy forces could establish a perimeter that would make helicopter insertion impossible. Sarah watched her teammates work together, with the kind of smooth coordination that came from years of training and experience. These men were the absolute elite of American military forces, selected for their skills and tested under the most challenging possible conditions. But she also recognized that they were approaching this situation as a conventional military operation, relying on tactics and procedures that had been refined through decades of special operations. Her approach was different because her experience had been different. Years of operating alone in hostile environments had taught her to think like the people who were hunting her, to anticipate their actions and exploit their assumptions about how American operatives would behave. That perspective was becoming increasingly valuable as enemy forces organized their search with the kind of professional competence that suggested extensive training and experience. As they continued their movement toward the extraction point, Sarah began to notice patterns in the enemy search that suggested they were making assumptions about the capabilities and likely behavior of the team responsible for Petrov's elimination. Those assumptions were logical, based on conventional special operations procedures, but they didn't account for the unconventional nature of Sarah's background and training. She shared her observations with Hayes, pointing out how they might be able to exploit enemy expectations to avoid detection during the final phase of their extraction. Her suggestions involved routes and techniques that were outside normal special operations doctrine, but they were based on years of successful evasion in similar circumstances. Hayes listened carefully to Sarah's recommendations and recognized their value immediately. His experience as a SEAL had taught him to appreciate unconventional thinking when it came from someone with proven results, and Sarah's track record spoke for itself. He passed her suggestions to Foster, who modified their movement plan to incorporate her insights into enemy behavior and search patterns. The modified route took them through terrain that conventional military thinking would have avoided, areas where they would be more exposed to observation, but where enemy forces would be less likely to expect American operators to travel. Sarah's understanding of how to appear harmless and unthreatening became a crucial advantage as they moved through areas where they might be observed by local civilians who could report their presence to enemy forces. Rivera maintained constant communication with Command, providing updates on their position and status while receiving real-time intelligence about enemy activities throughout the region. The coordination between their team and supporting elements was seamless, demonstrating the level of professionalism and capability that characterized American Special Operations Forces. As they approached the final phase of their extraction, Sarah found herself thinking about what would happen when they returned to base. The mission had been a complete success, but it had also marked a fundamental change in her career and status within the Special Operations community. She would no longer be able to operate in complete anonymity, and her legendary status would become a reality rather than a carefully guarded secret. The extraction point was a clearing surrounded by rocky outcroppings that would provide some concealment for the helicopter during pickup operations. Foster and Hayes established security positions while Rivera coordinated with the incoming aircraft, and Sarah prepared to destroy any equipment that couldn't be extracted with them. The helicopter arrived exactly on schedule, its pilot demonstrating the kind of precision flying that was required for operations in hostile territory. The pickup was conducted quickly and efficiently, with all 4 team members aboard, and the aircraft departing the area before enemy forces could respond to the sound of rotor blades. As they climbed away from the mountain terrain, Sarah looked down at the landscape where she had just completed what might be the most important mission of her career. The shot that had eliminated Viktor Petrov would prevent the compromise of dozens of American intelligence operatives, protecting a network that had taken years to establish and maintain. But more than that, the mission had marked her emergence from the shadows into the broader special operations community. The men sitting around her in the helicopter would return to their units with stories about Ghost 7, and those stories would spread throughout the elite circles of American military forces. Her days of complete anonymity were over. Chief Hayes leaned over to speak with Sarah during the flight back to base. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about that butterfly tattoo that caused such a stir in the briefing room. I'm starting to suspect there's more to that story than meets the eye." Sarah smiled slightly, remembering Petty Officer Williams' dismissive comments about her fake tattoo. "What makes you say that, Chief?" "Well, for one thing, I noticed that it seems to move and shift in a way that real tattoos don't," Hayes replied. "And given your background in covert operations, I'm guessing that everything about your appearance has been carefully designed to support whatever cover identity you might need to maintain."
Sarah nodded approvingly.
Hayes had made the kind of observation that suggested he understood the complexities of deep cover operations. "You're right that appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the most important things are the ones that everyone assumes are fake." Rivera joined the conversation, his curiosity evident. "So you're saying that the tattoo is actually some kind of sophisticated cover element? Something designed to make you appear harmless and non-threatening?" "The tattoo is exactly what it needs to be for any given situation," Sarah replied carefully. "Sometimes that means appearing to be a college student's impulsive decision. Sometimes it means something completely different." Foster looked puzzled, but Williams said it looked fake. "If it's designed to support your cover, wouldn't it need to look completely realistic?" Sarah reached back and touched the area where the butterfly tattoo was visible at the edge of her tactical vest. With a quick motion that the others could barely follow, she peeled away what appeared to be a sophisticated prosthetic applique, revealing underneath it a tattoo that was completely different from what they had seen before. Where the delicate pastel butterfly had been, there was now a black and grey design that depicted a skull with crosshairs superimposed over empty eye sockets. Below the skull were tally marks arranged in groups of 5, with the final group showing only 2 marks. The tattoo was clearly military in nature and suggested someone with extensive combat experience. The 3 operators stared in stunned silence as they realized what they were looking at. The butterfly tattoo that had seemed so incongruous with Sarah's deadly reputation had been a complete fabrication, a cover element designed to support her civilian identity. The real tattoo underneath told a very different story about who she actually was. 137 confirmed kills, Hayes said quietly, counting the tally marks that were now visible. "The briefing numbers were right there on your shoulder the whole time." Sarah nodded as she carefully reapplied the butterfly prosthetic, watching it blend seamlessly with her skin tone and appear completely natural once again. "The butterfly version is useful when I need to appear harmless and unthreatening. The real tattoo underneath tells the story that matters to people who understand what those marks represent." Rivera shook his head in amazement. So Williams was right that the tattoo looked fake, but he had no idea that there was something real underneath it. That's incredible attention to detail for maintaining operational security. "Everything about a deep cover operative's identity has to be carefully constructed and maintained," Sarah explained. "The clothes, the mannerisms, the backstory, and yes, even the body art. Every detail has to support the cover while concealing the reality of who you actually are and what you're capable of doing." Foster was still processing the implications of what he had just witnessed. "So when you were sitting in that briefing room being dismissed as someone's assistant, you were actually the most dangerous person in the building, and nobody except Commander Morrison knew it."
"That's exactly the point," Sarah replied. "The most effective weapons are often the ones that nobody sees coming."
"I've spent 8 years being underestimated by people who made assumptions based on my appearance, and those assumptions have kept me alive and allowed me to complete missions that would have been impossible for more conventional operators." As the helicopter approached their base, Sarah found herself thinking about what the future would hold. The mission to eliminate Viktor Petrov had been a complete success, but it had also marked the end of her career in deep cover operations. Too many people now knew who Ghost 7 really was, for her to return to the anonymous life she had lived for 8 years. But perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Working alongside Hayes, Rivera, and Foster had reminded her of the value of operating as part of a team, rather than always working alone. The special operations community had welcomed her once her true capabilities were revealed, and there would be other missions that could benefit from her unique skills and experience. Commander Morrison was waiting for them when they landed, his expression showing the satisfaction of someone whose mission had gone exactly according to plan. He debriefed the team personally, praising their professionalism and the flawless execution of an extremely challenging operation. When the formal debrief was complete, Morrison approached Sarah privately. I've been thinking about your future assignments, he said. Your cover identity has obviously been compromised by this mission, so returning to deep cover operations isn't really an option anymore. But I think that might actually be an opportunity rather than a limitation. Sarah listened as Morrison outlined possibilities for her continued service in special operations, including roles that would allow her to train other operators in the skills she had developed over years of covert work. The idea of sharing her knowledge and experience with the next generation of Special Forces personnel was appealing, even if it meant leaving behind the solitary life she had known for so long. As she walked away from the debrief, Sarah thought about Petty Officer Williams and his dismissive comments about her fake butterfly tattoo. He had been right that it was fake, but he had completely missed the significance of what that meant. Sometimes the most important truths were hidden beneath layers of deception, and sometimes the most dangerous people were the ones who looked the least threatening. The butterfly tattoo would continue to serve its purpose when she needed to blend into civilian environments, but now there would also be opportunities to reveal the reality that lay beneath the carefully constructed facade. Ghost 7 had emerged from the shadows, and the legend that had been whispered about in classified briefings was now a known quantity within the special operations community. But legends had a way of growing larger than the reality they were based on, and Sarah suspected that her story would continue to evolve as it was told and retold throughout the military. The shot that had eliminated Viktor Petrov would become part of sniper training curriculum, and the revelation about her true identity would become a cautionary tale about the danger of making assumptions based on appearance. Most importantly, the mission had proved that 8 years of solitary operations had prepared her for whatever challenges lay ahead. Whether working alone or as part of a team, whether hidden behind a cover identity or operating openly as herself, Sarah Chen had demonstrated that she possessed the skills and judgment necessary to succeed in any environment. The fake tattoo that had been mocked in a briefing room full of elite operators had ultimately revealed something real and significant about the nature of strength, courage, and service. Sometimes the most important victories were won by people who nobody expected to fight, and sometimes the greatest warriors were the ones who looked least like soldiers. As Ghost 7, Sarah had spent 8 years proving that deadly force could come in unexpected packages. As herself, she would continue to demonstrate that appearances could indeed be deceiving, and that the most dangerous weapons were often the ones that nobody saw coming until it was too late.